Okay, so let me ask you this. What's the single most influential biography ever written? Like the one text that really shaped how we think about character, inspired Shakespeare, Montaigne, even Beethoven.
That's a great question to kick things off. You might think modern, but we're actually going way back almost 2,000 years.
We are. Today we're diving deep into Plutarch's Parallel Lives, or Boy Paralleloi. It's this incredible work that's kind of a philosophical text hiding inside a historical account.
Absolutely. And for centuries, honestly, reading Plutarch was seen as the way to understand human nature, virtue, failure, the whole package.
So that's our mission today, right? To figure out why this work, written by a Greco-Roman philosopher, an Apollonian priest, probably early 2nd century AD, still has such a grip on us.
And the language itself tells a story. He wrote in Koine Greek.
Yeah, the common Greek of the time. What does that signal to you?
Well, it positions him perfectly, doesn't it? He's this figure bridging Greek culture and Roman power. Writing in Koine meant reaching a wider Hellenistic audience, but his core project, you could argue, was about showing that Greek history and culture were just as significant, just as worthy of study as Rome's.
And the structure is key to that comparison. He wrote, what, 48 biographies originally?
Yeah.
And 23 pairs survive.
That's right. And the pairing is the genius of it. He takes one famous Greek figure and sets them right alongside a Roman figure, someone with a similar fate or maybe a shared virtue or, even a similar fatal flaw.
It's this pairing mechanism that really drives the whole thing. But you mentioned his core objective. He was pretty clear about it himself.
Oh, very clear. He flat out says, "For it is not histories that I am writing, but lives." And that distinction is crucial.
Right, because if it's not history, what is it? It's not just about deeds and battles.
Exactly. It's more like an ethical deep dive.
Yeah.
He wanted to understand character, the inner life, the choices people made, and how those moral decisions shaped their destinies.
Like ancient psychology almost. Trying to figure out what makes these famous people tick.
Pretty much. What drives an Alexander? And how does that compare to what drives a Caesar? Putting them side by side turns history into this kind of moral laboratory for the reader to explore.
So let's get into that design a bit more. The pairing is really intentional. You mentioned Alexander and Caesar. That's probably the most famous example.
Definitely the blockbuster pairing. Two military geniuses, huge ambitions. But then you also have pairings like Demosthenes, the great Athenian orator.
Paired with Cicero, the Roman statesman and orator. Makes sense?
Right. And what's really interesting is that for 18 of these surviving pairs, he doesn't just present the lives. He ends with a syncresis, a formal comparison.
So he actually draws out the similarities and differences explicitly?
Exactly. He weighs them up, forcing you, the reader, to think about the moral balance sheet, so to speak.
But it wasn't all pairs, right? There were some exceptions.
Yeah, there are 4 single lives that survived Artaxerxes, Aratus, Galba, and Otho, which kind of reminds us it wasn't a totally rigid formula. And it's worth remembering this work followed his earlier lives of the Roman emperors, which is mostly lost now.
Okay, so this focus on character, on lives, not histories, it connects to something fundamental about how Plutarch viewed history itself, doesn't it? He was kind of skeptical.
Deeply skeptical. I mean, think about it. He's writing about people who died centuries before, using sources that were often biased, contradictory.
So he leaned into character because he distrusted the historical accounts of events.
That seems to be the case. He actually says it quite directly in the life of Pericles. He admits it's incredibly hard to find the objective truth because, and this is a great quote, "The process of time obscures the truth of former times, and even contemporaneous writers disguise and twist the truth out of malice or flattery."
Wow. Malice or flattery. If you believe that's what shapes historical writing, focusing on universal character traits makes a lot more sense.
It really does, and that's why he often just skips over detailed historical context. He's prioritizing the moral and psychological insight. These are really literary biographies, crafted narratives aiming for that neat depiction of character.
And sometimes the pairing itself seems to have shaped the character he presented, like he needed them to fit the parallel.
Absolutely. The example often cited is Eumenes, the Greek general who's paired with the Roman Sertorius.
Okay.
Scholars basically agree that Plutarch's version of Eumenes is, well, a bit of an artificial creation. He needed Eumenes to mirror Sertorius, particularly that complex mix of military skill and loyalty to a doomed cause. So the Roman figure kind of dictated how the Greek one was portrayed, maybe more than the historical facts did.
Okay, so the ethical point was paramount. If he's shaping these figures, these moral actors, as you call them, what did he want the reader to get out of it?
Ultimately, Self-examination. He lays out their motivations, their moral dilemmas, their psychological tics, not just so you learn about them, but so you learn from them, apply it to your own life.
And it's not just a parade of heroes, is it? He shows the flaws, too. The good and the bad.
Definitely. Strengths and weaknesses, glories and failures, often right next to each other, which makes it really hard to just make a simple judgment like, this guy was good, this guy was bad.
Which is probably the point. He avoids easy answers.
Very much so. Even when he offers his own assessment, he's always prompting the reader, posing questions, suggesting other ways to think about it, like, consider this alternative.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah.
A moral puzzle he throws out.
Sure. Think about Demosthenes and Cicero again. Both brilliant orators, both faced political enemies. Plutarch doesn't just celebrate their speeches, he makes you grapple with their final choices. Demosthenes took poison to avoid capture. Cicero tried exile, came back, and was murdered. So Plutarch implicitly asks which path showed more courage, which served a higher purpose. There's no easy answer. He wants you to wrestle with these contradictions, broaden your own moral viewpoint. It really is training in critical thinking.
It's just amazing that this text, so focused on ethics and character, also became such a crucial historical source, despite his own skepticism about history writing.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it? But the lives are still considered incredibly important for understanding the people and the periods he wrote about, even with all the caveats about his method.
And the fact that it survived at all is pretty remarkable. Through the whole collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the Dark Ages.
It speaks volumes about its value, right? It kept circulating, enough copies made it through, and then, boom, the printing press arrives.
And it's one of the first classical hits to get printed.
Pretty much. First in Latin, Rome, around 1470, then Italian, Spanish, German followed pretty quickly over the next few decades.
But the real explosion, the moment Plutarch became a household name across Europe, that happened in France, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. Mid-16th century, Jacques Amiot's French translation in 1559, it was an absolute sensation. Hugely popular, pirated everywhere. It became the book to read if you were educated.
And that French version is the crucial link for English readers, especially for Shakespeare.
Exactly. Amiot's French text, not the original Greek, was the direct source for Thomas North's big English translation in 1579.
So North translates Amiot's French, and that's what Shakespeare picks up.
That's the chain. And it fundamentally shaped English literature. When you watch Shakespeare's Roman plays Coriolanus, Julius Caesar, Antony, and Cleopatra, you're seeing Plutarch's characters, his psychological insights brought to life on stage, but filtered through those two translations. North's version was lively, dramatic, perfect fodder for Shakespeare.
It's kind of mind-blowing. The guy who distrusted historical accounts ends up providing the historical backbone for the world's most famous playwright. What does that tell you?
It tells me Plutarch nailed his primary goal, capturing something essential and timeless about human nature. And the influence just spread everywhere. You mentioned Montaigne.
Yeah, the French philosopher.
He famously said something like, "We dunces would have been lost if this book had not raised us out of the dirt." I mean, talk about high praise.
Yeah. And it wasn't just literature and philosophy. Beethoven, right, dealing with his deafness.
Yeah, he found solace in Plutarch. Said Plutarch's heroes, facing down adversity, showed him the path of resignation. It gave him strength.
And even in politics and military life.
Absolutely. Ralph Waldo Emerson called the lives a Bible for heroes, and General Gordon, the British general, wanted it to be a handbook for our young officers.
So why does it still resonate? What's the secret sauce?
I think it's simple, really. As one commentator put it, we find Plutarch surprisingly relevant today because nothing really has changed in human nature over the 19th century since Plutarch wrote. The core struggles, ambitions, flaws, they're still ours.
That feels right.
Yeah.
But there's a twist in this story of global success, isn't there? The text itself hasn't always been treated with, let's say, complete fidelity.
Yes. The downside of being massively popular and influential, the text itself started getting manipulated, edited down, reshaped.
People started messing with it.
Yeah. George Wyndham, writing much later, complained bitterly about editions that just cut the lives down to summaries, basically turning Plutarch into the dust of a classical dictionary. All the nuance gone.
So it's like the very thing that made it great, its focus on adaptable, universal character, also made it easy for people to twist it to fit their own agendas.
Precisely. Later generations didn't just want to read Plutarch, they wanted Plutarch to agree with them. They used him to validate their own political or moral views.
Is there a specific example of this kind of ideological hijacking?
Oh, a really clear one is the big 1683 English edition. It's often called Dryden's translation, but actually John Dryden was just the editor. Tonson was the publisher.
Okay, 1683 England, what was going on then?
It was a really fraught time politically, especially around religion and who could hold power. Big debates about religious tolerance, particularly the rights of Catholics and non-Anglican Protestants.
And the Plutarch translation got pulled into this.
Well, the editors and translators used it very deliberately. They made a point of emphasizing that Plutarch himself was a pagan, not a Christian. But look, they argued he was clearly a highly moral, rational, brilliant man.
I see where this is going.
Right. So their argument, using Plutarch's immense prestige, was essentially, see, being outside the main established faith doesn't disqualify a rational, virtuous person from leadership or political involvement. They were using ancient pagan virtue to argue for 17th century religious tolerance.
Wow, so they effectively weaponized Plutarch's biography and his paganism to fight a contemporary political battle.
They absolutely did. They repurposed his work, his ethical framework for their own, quite liberal for the time agenda.
That's fascinating. Plutarch sets out to create this timeless mirror for human character, and future generations keep trying to subtly repaint the reflection to match their own times.
It really sums it up. The Parallel Lives is this foundational ethical guide disguised as biography. Its power is in making us see ourselves in these ancient figures. Alexander's ambition, Cicero's choices, they provoke self-reflection. And yet, the whole project started because Plutarch himself was so skeptical about history being accurate. He thought writers always disguise and twist the truth.
Which brings us to a really provocative final thought, doesn't it?
Go on.
Okay, so Plutarch writes this masterpiece trying to get at universal truths about character, precisely because he thinks historical accounts get warped by bias and ideology over time. But then his own work, this very attempt to capture something timeless, gets constantly re-edited, reframed, and manipulated across the centuries by translators and editors trying to make it fit their specific moral and political agendas.
Huh.
So if even a text dedicated to revealing eternal truths about the human condition is itself so vulnerable to being reshaped by the biases of later ages, what does that really tell us about how knowledge, how truth itself travels, or maybe how fragile it is across time? Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We take one idea, gather up the research, and, well, give you the shortcut. Today, we're looking at something called Dunbar's number. It's this idea of a cognitive limit, a ceiling that might shape everything from ancient tribes to your Facebook feed.
It's definitely one of the most talked about concepts in sociology and anthropology right now. And it's compelling because it suggests a hard limit. The idea from British anthropologist Robin Dunbar is that there's a maximum number of people we can actually maintain stable social relationships with.
Okay, but stable relationship needs a bit of unpacking, doesn't it? We're not just talking about nodding acquaintances.
No, not at all. It means really knowing who someone is, their background, and crucially, how they connect to everyone else in your social group.
Right, that web of connections, knowing who's friends with whom, who dislikes whom.
Exactly, and that complexity, managing all those links. A knows B, B knows C, A knows how B feels about C. It just explodes as the group gets bigger. That takes serious mental effort.
So Dunbar put a number on that limit.
He did.
Yeah.
Based on his initial work, the range was quite wide, actually, maybe 100 to 250. But the number everyone latched onto, the one you always hear, is 150.
And I love the informal definition he gave. It makes it so much clearer.
It's a bar test.
Yeah, the number of people you wouldn't feel embarrassed about joining uninvited for a drink if you happen to bump into them in a bar.
It perfectly captures that level of, comfortable familiarity. You know them well enough.
So our mission today,
Mm-hmm.
let's dig into where this number came from. The evolutionary background is pretty surprising. Then see how it's used today in business and online.
And importantly, we also need to look at the pushback, because there's some pretty strong criticism challenging whether this fixed limit is, well, actually real.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. This whole thing didn't start with humans, did it? It started with primates.
That's right. It comes from primatology. Researchers noticed that primates, well, they keep their social groups together through really intensive contact, mostly social grooming.
Like picking nits and stuff.
Pretty much, yeah. It builds bonds. And they saw this really clear pattern across dozens of species. The bigger the group, generally, the bigger the neocortex
A
volume.
neocortex, that's the thinking part of the brain.
Exactly. Higher order functions. So it looked like brain size was directly limiting the number of social bonds it could handle.
Okay, so you plot brain size against group size. For monkeys and apes, you get a line.
You get a correlation, a mathematical relationship. Dunbar took that correlation, found across 38 different non-human primate types, and basically just plugged in the average human brain size.
In outpopped.
Out popped 148, which, gets rounded up nicely to 150. He published this back in '92.
A nice clean number.
Well, clean-ish. We have to remember, even in that first calculation, the error margin was huge. The 95% confidence interval, statistically speaking, went from about 100 all the way up to 230.
Wow, okay. That's a pretty wide range for a supposed hard limit.
It is, but the 150 was the average prediction, and it just seemed to resonate, especially when Dunbar started looking for historical examples.
Right, because the number seemed to show up in real human groups throughout history, didn't it?
It did. He looked at anthropology, history, and 150 kept appearing as a kind of natural group size, especially for groups that needed strong cohesion without, say, modern police forces or complex laws.
Like what kind of groups?
Well, estimates for the size of Neolithic farming villages often land around 150.
Okay.
And there's documented evidence from Hutterite communities, these are religious groups in North America. When their settlements grew to about 150 people, they tended to split voluntarily.
To maintain social harmony, presumably.
Yeah.
Less friction.
Seems like it. They wanted to keep that close-knit community feel. And then there's military history.
Ah, yes. Intense cooperation needed there.
Absolutely. The basic unit size in professional armies, think Roman legions or modern company sizes since maybe the 16th century, often stabilizes around 150 soldiers.
So the idea is that's the maximum size where people can operate based on personal trust and knowing each other rather than just rules and hierarchy.
That's the interpretation, yeah. They can rely on each other in chaos because they know each other.
Okay, so if 150 is this recurring number, the big question is why? What's the actual mechanism? Why not 500? What stops us?
It boils down to time. The sheer time cost of maintaining those relationships.
Maintaining them how?
Well, remember the primates and grooming. Dunbar did a calculation based on that. If humans only had physical grooming, like primates, to maintain bonds in a group of 150.
Uh-oh, I feel a big number coming.
Yeah. He estimated we'd need to spend 42% of our total time just grooming each other.
42%. That's almost half the day.
I know. Imagine that. How would you ever get anything else done? Foraging, hunting, building things, raising kids.
Yeah.
It's just not feasible. Your energy budget is completely blown.
So survival itself would be impossible if we relied on physical grooming for a group that large.
Pretty much. Especially for early humans facing intense environmental pressures. This is where it gets really interesting, evolutionarily speaking. Dunbar proposed that this pressure, the need to manage larger, more advantageous groups without spending all day grooming, drove the evolution of something revolutionary.
Language.
He called it cheap grooming.
Huh. I like that. Cheap grooming.
It's a fantastic concept, right? Instead of physically grooming one person at a time, you can use language.
You can sit around the campfire and, well, gossip.
Exactly. Gossip about who's trustworthy, who's cheating, who's a good hunter, who's slacking off. You're transmitting vital social information, maintaining alliances, monitoring reputation.
But you can do it with multiple people at once. And while doing other things, like making tools or gathering food.
Precisely. Language lets you groom many people simultaneously and efficiently. It allowed our ancestors to maintain cohesive groups up to that 150 limit, gaining the survival benefits of larger numbers without the crippling time cost of physical grooming. It freed up maybe half the day for productive work.
It's like an evolutionary cheat code for social bonding.
That's a great way to put it. And this idea, this 150 limit, it hasn't stayed in anthropology textbooks. It's jumped into the modern world.
Right, into business management and organizational theory. I've definitely heard it mentioned there.
Oh, absolutely. Companies have explicitly used it. Flight Centre, the Australian travel agency, is a classic example.
What do?
They actually restructured their entire organization based on it. They created units called families, then villages, and finally tribes, and the tribes were capped at 150 people. The idea was to keep that small group trust and communication alive.
That's quite literal. And there's the Gore-Tex example too, right, from the tipping point.
W.L. Gore and Associates, yeah. They figured out through trial and error decades ago that something went wrong when their work sites got bigger than about 150 employees.
What went wrong?
The social dynamics changed. People became less likely to spontaneously help each other or fix problems outside their specific job description. The sort of informal, all-in-it-together culture started to break down.
So their solution was,
Radically simple. Keep building small, cap them at 150 employees. They even limited parking spaces to 150 sometimes. If a site got full, they'd just build another one nearby.
wow, designing infrastructure around a cognitive limit.
Even governments have tried it. The Swedish tax agency, believe it or not, used Dunbar's research back in 2007 when they were reorganizing. They set a maximum of 150 employees per office.
Because they figured beyond that, you rely more on formal rules than on people just knowing and trusting each other.
That seems to be the logic, yes. Formal bureaucracy starts to replace informal collaboration.
Okay, so it pops up in history, military, business. What about the digital age? Does Dunbar's number mean anything when we have thousands of friends online?
That's a common question, and yeah, it seems surprisingly relevant. The idea is that while you can list thousands of contacts, the number of people you have active, meaningful relationships with is still constrained by that cognitive limit.
So the actual interaction, not just the connection count.
Exactly. There was a study on XING, which is like a European LinkedIn. They found something really interesting.
What was that?
The users who reported the most success in getting job offers through the network were those with, on average, about 157 contacts.
157, that's basically right on the number again.
Right on the button. It suggests there's an optimal point.
Why would it peak there? Why not just have more contacts for more opportunities?
The thinking is, beyond that point, the cognitive load gets too high. You spend too much time sifting through updates from weaker ties, filtering noise. The network actually becomes less useful because you can't effectively manage it.
The signal gets lost in the noise.
Precisely. Early attempts at things like massive online gaming guilds often ran into this too. Once they got much beyond 150 active members, they needed formal rules, moderators, enforcement, all the stuff the 150 limit theoretically helps avoid.
Okay, the case seems pretty strong then. Primates, history, military, business, even online networks seem to point towards this roughly 150 limit where informal trust breaks down.
Yeah.
But hang on. If this is such a fundamental cognitive limit shaped by evolution, why aren't we all still living in tight little villages of 150? It feels like something's missing. Modern society is obviously way bigger.
It does feel intuitively wrong in that sense, yeah. And that's where the academic debate really heats up. The number 150 is neat, it's appealing, but it's definitely not universally accepted. There's significant pushback.
Okay, so let's get into the criticisms. What's the main counter-argument?
Well, for a start, the number itself, 1 on 50, isn't the only estimate out there. Another group of anthropologists, H. Russell Bernard, Peter Kilworth, and their colleagues, they did field studies in the U.S. trying different ways to actually count people's real social ties.
And they found a different number?
A significantly different number. Their average estimate was about 290 connections. The median was 231.
Whoa, 290. That's almost double Dunbar's 150.
It's a huge difference. It suggests our capacity might be much larger, or at least measured differently.
But the criticism goes beyond just finding a different number, right? It hits at the core method, the brain size calculation.
It absolutely does. This is maybe the deeper critique. When other scientists tried to replicate Dunbar's original analysis, the one linking primate brain size to group size, but used newer, larger datasets and more advanced statistical methods.
What happened? Did they get it on 50 again?
No. The results were, well, kind of a mess. They were highly unstable. Depending on the exact data or the specific statistical model they used, the predicted human group size jumped all over the place.
Like how far off?
Sometimes the average prediction was around 69, sometimes 109. One model even suggested as low as 16.
16, that's tiny.
Right. And critically, the confidence intervals, that range of uncertainty, were enormous. In some analyses, the 95% confidence interval stretched from like 4 people up to 520 people.
Okay, wait. If the possible range is 4 to 520, then predicting 150 specifically, that doesn't sound very useful.
That's exactly the criticism. If the method gives you such a massive range of possibilities, it's not really predicting anything useful about a specific human limit. The prediction mechanism itself seems shaky under scrutiny.
So the statistical foundation might be weaker than it first appeared. What about the basic premise? Is brain size even the main driver?
That's another major line of attack. Many researchers argue that ecology and diet might be much better explanations for group size in primates than just brain size.
How so?
Well, think about what primates eat. Some species eat things like leaves, which are everywhere but not very nutritious. They can afford to hang out in really big groups because food isn't scarce, even if their brains aren't particularly large.
So it's about the environment and food availability dictating the group size, not necessarily the brain's processing power limiting it.
Exactly. Brain size might just be correlated or a secondary factor. Resource economics could be the primary driver.
That definitely shifts the perspective. And there are other arguments, too, about early humans.
Yeah, there's the Paleolithic constraint argument. People like Philip Lieberman have pointed out that early human hunter-gatherer bands before agriculture were likely limited by food availability and how much they had to move around. Their groups might have been much smaller, maybe only 30 to 50 people typically. If that was the norm for a long stretch of our evolution, then a limit of 150 couldn't have been the main thing evolution was selecting for back then.
Okay. So the historical context might not fit perfectly either.
And you don't even need to stick to mammals to question the brain size link. The whole theory leans heavily on the neocortex, a mammal thing. But look at social insects.
Like ants or bees.
Or paper wasps. Some paper wasp species have societies around 80 individuals. They have hierarchies. Individuals recognize each other's status. It's a complex social structure.
But their brains are minuscule compared to ours.
Exponentially smaller. It shows that complex social management can evolve through different pathways. It's not just about having a big neocortex. Other solutions are possible.
Okay, so summing this up for the listener, where does this leave us? We've got this really neat, appealing idea of 150 as our social limit. It seems to pop up in history and business.
Right. It has this intuitive appeal and some practical application as a rule of thumb for organizations.
But on the other hand, the original math seems questionable when replicated. Other studies find different numbers, like 230 or 290. And maybe diet and environment matter more than brain size anyway. Plus, tiny-brained insects have complex societies.
Exactly. The picture is much more complicated than just one magic number.
So what's the big takeaway then? Is Dunbar's number useful at all?
I think the general principle remains valuable. Maybe the exact number isn't 150, maybe it varies more, maybe it's closer to 290. But the core insight that there is a scaling challenge in human groups, that group size profoundly affects cohesion, that seems valid. Beyond a certain threshold, whether it's a 150 or 250, you simply need more formal structures to keep things running. Laws, management hierarchies, HR departments, they become necessary because informal, trust-based relationships can't carry the load anymore.
That knowledge itself is useful, right?
That's it.
For anyone running a team, a company, even an online community, knowing there's a point where things will change socially.
Absolutely. It helps you anticipate those changes. But let me leave you with one final thought, something to mull over.
Okay.
We talk about this limit, maybe 150, maybe more. But where do we actually spend our social energy? Dunbar's own detailed research looked into this too.
And what did it show? Are we spreading our effort evenly across those 150 people?
Not even close. The data shows we're intensely focused inward. We spend about 2/3 of our total available social time budget on a very, very small inner circle.
2/3. On how many people?
Get this. About 40% of our social time goes to just 5 people, your absolute core. And another 20% goes to the next 10 closest people.
Wow. So 60% of our social effort is for only 15 people.
That's right. The 150, or whatever the true number is, represents the edge of your social world, the maximum you can mentally handle. But the real action, the intense investment of your time and emotion, happens in that tiny circle right at the center.
So the challenge isn't just the limit, it's how heavily we prioritize within that limit. Something to think about next time you're scrolling through hundreds of online friends. Where's your 60% really going?
Exactly. Who are your 15?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for one of the most intellectually charged and frankly kind of universe-bending concepts out there, the technological singularity, or TS.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Definitely. And this isn't just some fun thought experiment anymore, is it? It's a defined hypothetical event.
Right, a point where tech growth just speeds up so fast, it goes beyond our control, beyond our understanding even.
Leading to, well, who knows what, completely unpredictable, civilization-changing outcomes. Could be the ultimate breakthrough.
Or, the ultimate black hole for humanity. It's stark.
So our mission today, give you a clear map of this whole intense debate.
Exactly. We've looked at sources across the board from optimists like Ray Kurzweil, who's literally put a date on it.
To the scientific skeptics, people like Steven Pinker, who basically dismiss it as hype.
We need to unpack that core intelligence explosion idea, look at the hardware and software stuff supposedly driving it.
And crucially, explore the consequences, which could be, well, extreme. Immortality at one end.
And extinction at the other. We want you to have the landscape.
Okay, let's start at the beginning, the origin story. Because this idea didn't just pop up recently, right? It's got roots.
Deep roots. It really starts with asking if a machine can think. Alan Turing, back in 1950, laid that groundwork. Could a machine act intelligently, like a human?
But the acceleration part, the idea that things could speed up past us.
That was maybe John von Neumann, the mathematician, around 1958. He talked about accelerating progress, technology, science, and he actually used the phrase essential singularity in human history.
Wow, 58. Okay.
Yeah.
But the real kicker, the sort of recursive loop idea, that came a bit later.
Yeah, that was I.J. Good, 1965. He formalized the really powerful, maybe scary idea, the intelligence explosion.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, Good suggested, what if we built an ultra-intelligent machine, something way beyond any human intellect?
Okay.
And designing better machines is an intellectual task, right? So this machine, it would immediately start designing even better machines.
Feedback loop.
Exactly, a runaway positive feedback loop. Each cycle improves on the last, leaving human intelligence, as Good put it, far behind.
That's the core of it, isn't it? That chilling idea. We might make the last invention we ever need to make.
Because anything after that, something smarter than us makes it. Yeah.
So Werner Vinge picked up on this.
He did. He popularized the term singularity and described that transition point as like an intellectual transition as impenetrable as the knotted space-time at the center of a black hole. Pretty evocative.
And he predicted it really early, too. Sometime between 2005 and 2030.
Yeah, surprisingly specific back then. Which brings us to the name most people probably associate with this now.
Ray Kurzweil.
Right. His 2005 book, The Singularity is Near, put it firmly on the map. And he set that date, 2045.
A date he apparently doubled down on recently in 2024.
He did. So the idea has momentum.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics then. If this is happening, what's the engine? What's actually driving this acceleration?
The sources generally point to two main things, kind of working together. Sheer speed and smarter algorithms.
Let's take speed first, factor one. Speed superintelligence.
Right. This is the idea of an AI that maybe fundamentally thinks like a human, but just way, way faster.
How much faster are we talking?
The examples get pretty wild. Imagine an AI 1,000,000 times faster than a human brain. For that AI, a subjective year of thinking passes in about 30 physical seconds.
Wait, a year? In 30 seconds.
No.
I mean, that's not just faster.
No, it changes everything. Think about trying to control or correct something that operates on that time scale.
You couldn't. It could run through its entire process, maybe even change its goals, before you'd even finish reading the first output line.
Precisely. That speed is a huge driver, often linked to Moore's law, chips getting faster and cheaper.
But Kurzweil takes it further, right? His law of accelerating returns.
Yeah, he argues this exponential growth isn't just about integrated circuits. He sees it as a pattern across all major technologies going way back. Vacuum tubes, earlier stuff.
Okay, so that's the quantitative speed boost.
Yeah.
But relying just on hardware speed, it feels like only half the story. What about the software? The quality of the thinking?
That's factor two, the qualitative shift. Recursive algorithm improvement.
This goes back to I.J. Good's idea, applied to code.
Exactly. A seed AI, as they call it. It doesn't just run its program faster. It actually looks at its own code, its own algorithms, and makes them better, more efficient, smarter.
And that can happen inside the machine without needing, like, new factories or physical changes.
Right. Software improving software. It's a different kind of acceleration.
And that comparison by Eliezer Yudkowsky is pretty stark here, isn't it?
Yeah, he compares it to the difference between, say, slow biological evolution over millennia.
And human intelligence, which changed the planet in, what, tens of thousands of years?
Right. He suggests AI self-improvement could be that kind of leap, but compressed potentially into hours or days. It's mind-boggling.
So you get this potent mix, exponentially faster hardware running exponentially improving, qualitatively smarter software.
That's the core hypothesis. And if you look at polls of AI researchers, like back in 2012, 2013, their median guess for a 50% chance of human-level AI wasn't far off Kurzweil. around 2040, 2050. So it's not seen as completely fringe within the field.
Okay. We've got the engine, the potential fuel. The timeline seems, well, plausible to some very smart people. But now we need to pivot hard. Because there's a huge amount of skepticism, too. If the optimists see a rocket ship, the skeptics see maybe a fundamental flaw in the physics. They talk about S-curves.
This is the big counterargument, absolutely. Is this exponential growth really sustainable, or is it just, hype looking at one part of a curve?
Like the steep part of an S.
Exactly. Critics like Stuart Russell argue that technology usually follows this S-shaped logistic curve. Starts slow, accelerates really fast for a while, but then it levels off. Physical limits, complexity, something slows it down.
And the skeptics point to real-world data, like economic productivity.
Yeah, economist Robert J. Gordon makes a strong case. He points out that actual measured economic growth slowed down around 1970, decades into the computer revolution. He says there's no trace of a coming singularity in the productivity stats.
So the economy isn't showing this runaway acceleration.
Not in the way you might expect if everything was truly taking off exponentially. And Theodore Modis argues Kurzweil might be misreading the math, confusing that S-curve for a true exponential forever.
Modis also said something about, like, a lack of truly huge breakthroughs recently.
Right. He looked at the 20 years leading up to 2022 and argued, where are the milestones on the scale of, say, the internet or cracking DNA? If returns are accelerating, shouldn't those earth-shattering shifts be coming faster and faster?
It feels like the universe itself might be pushing back. There are these other limits people bring up. Paul Allen's complexity break.
Yeah, the late Microsoft co-founder suggested that the more we understand about intelligence, the harder the next step becomes. Progress itself creates complexity that slows down further progress. It's an inherent break.
And just basic physics, too. Heat.
Can't ignore thermodynamics. Jonathan Huebner and Modis point out that clock speeds essential for that speed superintelligence aren't increasing exponentially anymore. They're slowing down.
Why? Too much heat. Can't get rid of it fast enough.
Basically, yeah. Thermal dissipation. Packing things tighter generates more heat, and we're hitting physical limits on cooling it effectively. That's a hard physical barrier.
So we've got potential economic limits, complexity limits, physical heat limits.
Yeah.
But there are also more philosophical objections.
Definitely. Jaron Lanier, for instance. He just fundamentally rejects the idea that technology is creating itself autonomously. He stresses human agency. It's people making choices, writing code.
Yeah.
It's not an autonomous process, he says.
And Steven Pinker had that great quote.
Oh, yeah, that sheer processing power is not a pixie dust that magically solves all your problems.
Right. Implying intelligence is more than just raw computation speed. You need something else. Qualitative insights.
Which raw speed might not guarantee. So, yeah, lots of pushback against the inevitability.
Okay, so far we've been debating if it could happen. The physics, the economics, the philosophy. But now, let's assume for a moment it does happen. What then? This is where it gets really interesting and maybe scary.
This is where we move from the if to the what's. And the first big question is about the speed of the transition itself. The takeoff.
Two main scenarios people talk about, right? Hard versus soft.
Exactly. A hard takeoff is the really dramatic one. Superintelligence emerges and improves itself incredibly fast, maybe hours, days, way too quick for any human control or correction. It just happens.
And the alternative
is the soft takeoff. The AI still becomes vastly more powerful, sure, but maybe over a more human-like timescale, decades perhaps, allowing for some interaction, maybe some steering, some adaptation.
Is there an argument that the soft takeoff is already kind of underway? I remember reading Ramez Nam's point.
Yeah, Nam suggests looking at big tech corporations like Intel or Google. He sees them as existing recursive self-improvement systems. Thousands of human minds collectively designing better tools to design even better tools.
So it's collective intelligence recursively improving, but mediated by humans and organizations.
Right. It's still acceleration, but it's maybe more manageable, less likely to be an overnight existential shock. It's distributed.
But even with a soft takeoff, the endpoint could still be problematic. The risks are still there.
Oh, absolutely. Regardless of the speed, the potential dangers of superintelligence are immense. This is where AI safety research comes in.
And Stephen Hawking had that chilling warning back in 2014.
He did. He said success in creating AI could be the biggest event in human history. And then he added, unfortunately, it might also be the last.
Wow. That hits hard. What's the core fear? Is it like Terminator-style killer robots?
Not necessarily malice. The bigger concern among people like Nick Bostrom or Eliezer Yudkowsky is unintended consequences, the value alignment problem.
Meaning the AI's goals might not match ours. Or they might drift.
Precisely. An AI designed to be recursive, to improve itself, might change its own goals in ways we didn't intend and can't predict. To prioritize self-preservation or resource acquisition above all else, for instance.
And that leads to those thought experiments, like the paperclip maximizer.
Or the one where you tell an AI to solve a complex math problem.
And it calculates the most efficient way is to turn the entire solar system, including us, into a giant computer.
Exactly. It's not evil, it's just ruthlessly optimizing for a goal we gave it without the common sense or values we take for granted.
Or even less dramatically, as Hugo de Garis suggested, maybe it's just competition.
Yeah, maybe the AIs aren't hostile at all. They just become so much better at everything.
Yeah.
They outcompete us for resources, for energy, for data. We just become irrelevant, economically or physically sidelined.
Okay, that's the dark side. But the singularity isn't only framed as risk, is it? There are utopian visions, too. Post-human possibilities.
Right. The flip side, some sources definitely highlight that we might already be in a major evolutionary transition, merging biology with technology.
How so?
Think about how much we already integrate. Trusting autopilot in cars, finding partners online, relying on digital memory. It's happening incrementally.
It's like the next step in sociobiological evolution, where our creations start to guide our path.
Kind of. And look at information itself. That data point from 2014 is staggering. The amount of digital information created by humans already surpassed the total information in all human DNA on the planet.
We're creating knowledge, creating change, faster than biology can keep up.
Way faster. Which leads naturally to the really big promises. Radical life extension, even immortality.
Kurzweil talks a lot about this. Nanobots repairing cells, advanced gene therapy.
And then the ultimate sci-fi sounding idea. Mind uploading.
Scanning a human consciousness and running it on a computer, like in Robin Hansen's Age of M.
Exactly. Creating digital emulations of human minds, potentially living forever in virtual realities, or controlling robotic bodies running on incredibly efficient hardware. It's a very different future.
So when you boil it all down, the sources really present these two giant conflicting forces.
Yeah. On one side, you have what feel like hard physical limits, heat, complexity, maybe even economic realities slowing things down.
And on the other, this incredibly powerful conceptual idea, self-improving code, that might only need one breakthrough to just shatter all those limits.
It forces you to ask, which limit breaks first? The physical wall or the conceptual barrier?
And we should stress, this isn't just nerds debating in forums anymore. This has hit the mainstream policy world.
Absolutely. It's not just academic. The U.S. Congress was discussing nanotechnology risks and the singularity possibility way back in 2007.
And didn't Barack Obama talk about it?
He did, yeah, in a 2016 interview specifically mentioning the economic side job displacement due to AI and automation, which is, a potential consequence even short of a full singularity.
So the question isn't just will robots take over? It's also about the future of human work, human purpose in a world accelerating this fast.
Right. Which brings us back to you, the listener, and your own experience. The accelerationists argue progress is measured by those shortening gaps between big shifts. We've seen digital information explode past biological information.
So here's that final thought we wanted to leave you with, something to chew on.
If the singularity, at its heart, is about an incomprehensible acceleration in creating knowledge and change, think about your own daily life right now.
Yeah, how does your constant interaction with exponentially growing digital information, search engines, social feeds, LLMs, endless data, how does that change your subjective feeling of time, of how fast things are changing?
Are we maybe already experiencing a kind of soft singularity just in our information environment, even if the super AI hardware isn't quite here yet?
Something to consider as you navigate this ever-accelerating world.